The morning started like any other Tuesday until the screens across Earth lit up with impossible images. Massive ships hung at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming like polished silver against the starfield. The vessels were beautiful, in a way that human engineering had never achieved, smooth curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Ambassador Taemin Kim had been drinking his morning coffee when the emergency call came. Now he stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall, his hands trembling slightly as he watched the live feed from the landing site in Switzerland. The alien craft had descended with impossible grace, making no sound as it settled onto the prepared landing pad. The beings that emerged moved with careful, measured steps. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet in height, with skin that seemed to catch and reflect light like crystal. Their faces were almost human but refined, as if someone had taken the best features of humanity and perfected them. They wore flowing robes that shifted color in the sunlight, and when their leader stepped forward, Taemin felt his breath catch. "Welcome to Earth," Taemin said, his voice carrying across the silent plaza through hidden speakers. The words felt inadequate, too small for this moment that would divide human history into before and after. The alien leader tilted its head in what seemed like a gesture of respect. When it spoke, its voice was melodious, speaking perfect Korean. "We are honored to meet the people of Earth. I am Veltar, of the Kahari. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our peoples." The translator devices the aliens provided worked flawlessly, converting their speech into 17 different human languages simultaneously. Within hours, the news had spread across every continent. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Dr. Jinwoo Park barely slept for the first week after contact. As head of xenological studies at Seoul National University, he suddenly found himself at the center of the most important research project in human history. The Kahari had been generous beyond imagination, sharing technological blueprints, historical records, and cultural artifacts that would take decades to fully understand. The gifts they brought seemed miraculous. Medical scanners that could detect and eliminate cancer cells without harming healthy tissue. Energy generators that drew power from quantum fluctuations, producing clean electricity without fuel or waste. Transportation systems that could move people across continents in minutes without environmental impact. Food synthesis technology that could end world hunger overnight. World leaders fell over themselves to establish diplomatic relations. Kahari embassies that appeared in major cities became pilgrimage sites for millions of humans eager to glimpse their alien visitors. The beings were patient with human curiosity, answering questions with gentle humor and sharing stories of their ancient civilization. Young Lee worked in the basement archives of the university, her desk buried under stacks of printed documents and holographic displays. As Jinwoo's research assistant, she had been assigned the task of cataloging the historical records the Kayari had shared. The work was meticulous and often tedious, but she found herself fascinated by glimpses into an alien civilization. It's thousands of years old. It was during her 3rd week of continuous work that she noticed the first inconsistency. The Kayahari claimed to have achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 3,000 years ago, a breakthrough that had allowed them to spread across the galaxy. But their colonial records, the detailed accounts of establishing settlements on distant worlds, only went back 800 years. She cross-referenced the dates multiple times, thinking she had made an error in converting between the alien calendar system and human measurements. But the discrepancy remained. Over 2,000 years of space travel with no record of where they had gone or what they had done. "Professor," she called to Jinwoo, who was hunched over a different set of documents across the archive room.
Nice.
"Dates don't match up. They claim to have discovered faster-than-light travel 3,000 years ago, but their colonial records only go back 800 years. Jinwoo looked up from his analysis of Kahari poetry, his eyes red from strain. The alien literature was beautiful, filled with complex metaphors about growth, cultivation, and the cycles of civilization. He had been trying to understand the cultural significance of their gardening imagery, which appeared throughout their historical texts. "Probably just different calendar systems," he murmured, already turning back to his work. "Or maybe they didn't keep detailed records during their early expansion period?" Some human civilizations have gaps in their historical accounts too. Saul Young nodded, but the explanation didn't satisfy her completely. She made a note in her personal files and continued her work, but the discrepancy nagged at her. In the weeks that followed, she began to notice other, small inconsistencies. References to species and civilizations that appeared briefly in the records, then vanished without explanation. Mentions of transcendence and natural cycles that seemed to carry deeper meaning than their surface interpretation suggested. The excitement of first contact swept across Earth like a fever. Stock markets soared as investors anticipated the economic benefits of alien technology. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the new discoveries. Children drew pictures of the beautiful crystalline beings in art classes. The Kahari had brought hope to humanity, proof that intelligence and compassion could flourish on a galactic scale. But in the quiet of the archive room, Soyoung continued her meticulous work, documenting every detail of the Kahari records. She began to keep a separate file for the inconsistencies she discovered. Not yet understanding their significance, but unable to ignore the growing pattern of gaps and contradictions in the aliens. Perfect History, the second wave of visitors, arrived on a Thursday morning, their ships appearing like delicate flowers blooming in Earth's orbit. The Vorlani were nothing like the crystalline Kahari. They moved like dancers, their bodies seeming to flow rather than walk, with skin that shimmered in colors that had no names in human language. When they spoke, their voices carried musical tones that made listeners feel as though they were hearing. Poetry. The gifts the Vorlani brought were different from the Kahari's practical technologies. They shared artistic techniques that allowed human painters to create images that seemed to move and breathe on the canvas. Musicians learned to compose melodies that could evoke specific emotions in listeners, while writers discovered ways to craft stories that felt more real than memory. Within weeks, human creativity exploded into new forms that had never existed before. Captain Dong Ho Choi watched the artistic demonstrations from the viewing deck of the Seoul space station. He had been selected to command humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission, and the responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. The Vorlani performance below was beautiful, but something about their perfect grace made him uneasy. They moved too smoothly, spoke too carefully, as if every gesture had been practiced thousands of times. The third species to visit Earth were the Vek, who arrived in functional ships that looked like flying factories. They were short and broad, with thick arms and patient expressions. Where the Vorlani brought art, the Vek brought industry. They showed humans how to build mining equipment that could harvest entire asteroids in days, turning space rocks into refined metals and rare elements. They demonstrated manufacturing techniques that could build cities in weeks rather than years. "We are honored to welcome humanity into the Galactic Collective," announced Kahari Ambassador Veltar during the grand ceremony at New Geneva Spaceport. Thousands of humans gathered to witness the historic moment, while millions more watched. Through global broadcasts, representatives from dozens of alien species stood on the platform, each unique in appearance, but united in their warm smiles. "You join over 3,000 species in peaceful cooperation and mutual prosperity," Veltar continued, his crystalline features reflecting the stage lights. "Together we explore the galaxy, share knowledge, and grow as one great family of intelligent beings." The crowd erupted in cheers. Children waved flags depicting the symbols of various alien species. Scientists in the audience whispered excitedly about the research opportunities. Politicians calculated the economic benefits of galactic trade. And for most of humanity, this was the greatest day in their species' history. Captain Choi's ship, the Unity, launched 3 months later on humanity's first diplomatic mission to an alien world. The journey to Kelthora, the Kahari homeworld, took only 6 days using the faster-than-light technology the aliens had shared. Choi spent most of the trip studying briefing materials and trying to calm his nerves. Kelthora was more beautiful than the photographs had suggested. The planet's surface was covered in golden plains that stretched to the horizon, broken by cities that seemed to grow from the ground like crystal formations. The buildings rose in spirals and curves that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Gardens filled with impossible flowers connected the structures, and streams of clear water flowed through channels carved into the living rock. "Your world is magnificent," Choi told his Kahari guide as they walked through the central plaza of the capital city. The alien's name was Kethrin, and he had been assigned to show the human delegation around their world. "We are pleased that you find it beautiful," Kethrin replied. "This city has stood for many centuries, a testament to the skill of its builders." Choi paused beside a fountain carved from what looked like a single piece of amber. The craftsmanship was incredible, more detailed than anything humans had ever created. "This city?" he asked. "How old is it?" "Ancient," came the reply. "Built by the Mordeth, who were welcomed into the collective long ago." The Mordeth. Choi had never heard the name before, despite studying every file the Kahari had shared about galactic history. "Where are the Mordeth now?" There was a pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "They transcended to a higher plane of existence. It happens to many species as they mature." Choi nodded, but the answer felt incomplete. He had similar conversations throughout his tour of Kelthura. Beautiful cities built by species he had never heard of. Magnificent works of art created by beings who had apparently moved beyond physical existence. Gardens planted by civilizations that had transcended their mortal forms back on Earth. So-young Lee had been promoted to head her own research division. The promotion came with access to archaeological data from dozens of newly contacted worlds. Information that the various alien species had generously shared to help humanity understand galactic history. She worked from a new office in the expanded Xenological Research Center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the ruins of ancient civilizations. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in chemical solution. Every world showed the same progression. First, evidence of a thriving, unique civilization with its own architecture, art, and technology. Then, signs of contact with the galactic collective. Advanced technologies appeared suddenly in the archaeological record. Rapid expansion followed, with settlements spreading across multiple worlds. But then, always came the silence. The civilizations simply stopped building, stopped creating, stopped leaving traces in the historical record. The official explanations were always the same: transcendence, natural evolution, peaceful integration into higher forms of existence. So-young stared at the data until her eyes burned. Every single species that had joined the collective had followed the same path: contact, advancement, expansion, then disappearance. The pattern was so consistent, it seemed impossible to be coincidence. She began to keep careful notes, documenting each case. The fear growing in her chest told her she was discovering something that no one wanted to acknowledge. The conference room felt smaller than usual as So-young spread the holographic displays across the table. The blue light from the projectors cast strange shadows on the faces of the 5 people gathered there. Outside the windows of the research center, the lights of Seoul twinkled in the evening darkness, but inside, the mood was heavy with discovery. "Look at this," So-young said, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement and fear. She had been working for 18 months straight, barely sleeping, driven by a growing certainty that something was terribly wrong with the official story of galactic history. Jinwoo sat across from her, his face showing the strain of his new position. As Earth's chief xenological advisor, the job had aged him quickly, dealing with politicians and alien ambassadors while trying to manage the flood of new information coming from dozens of species. He rubbed his tired eyes and focused on the data floating in front of him. "The Zenthari were welcomed into the collective 847 years ago," So-young continued, highlighting sections of the display with her finger. "For 2 centuries, they expanded rapidly, establishing colonies across 12 systems. Their population grew from 3 billion to over 50 billion. Their technology advanced at an incredible rate. They built cities that made our greatest achievements look like mud huts." Dr. Hyunsu Kim from the Military Analysis Division leaned forward, his expression grim. He had been studying the strategic implications of humanity's integration into the collective, and what he had found disturbed him. Then their population began declining. The official records cite cultural stagnation and natural demographic transitions. But look at the timeline. So-young said, zooming in on specific data points. The decline wasn't gradual. It happened over just 50 years. A civilization that had been expanding for centuries suddenly stopped building, stopped exploring, stopped growing. Their birth rates dropped to almost zero. Their colonies were abandoned one by one. Dr. Yunji Yang, from Archaeological Sciences, had been quiet during the presentation, but now she spoke up. The same pattern appears in the Mordeth records, the Kelvani archives, and 73 other species. Contact, expansion, decline, disappearance. Captain Choi recently returned from his 5th diplomatic mission, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The trips to alien worlds had been incredible experiences, but they had also raised questions that kept him awake at night. The official explanation is always the same, he said. The species evolved beyond physical existence. They transcended. To a higher plane, they became one with the universe. But that's impossible, Jin Wu protested, though his voice lacked conviction. We've met dozens of thriving species. The Vorlani, the Vek, the Zerathi, the Korthani. They're all healthy. Active civilizations. Have we? Yun Ji interrupted, her voice sharp. Or have we met the same dozen species over and over, playing different roles? She activated her own display, showing genetic analysis data that had taken months to compile. The Kahari introduce us to the Vorlani, who introduce us to the Vek, who introduce us to the Zerathi. But look at the genetic markers I've been analyzing. The data showed DNA sequences from tissue samples, hair follicles, and skin cells that the aliens had left behind during their visits to Earth. Youngji had collected them secretly, using her position as head of archaeological sciences to justify her research. Subtle similarities, she continued, highlighting sections of the genetic code, as if they're all related. It's not just the same species, but the same genetic pool. The differences are mainly cosmetic, height, skin color, body structure, but the underlying DNA is remarkably similar. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Captain Choi's expression darkened as he thought about his recent missions. I've been to 17 different worlds. Each one was beautiful, advanced, welcoming. But now that I think about it, he paused, his voice trailing off. What is it? So-young asked. I never saw children, Choi said slowly. Never saw elderly, just adults in their prime, as if they were all the same age, I thought. It was just their advanced medical technology, keeping everyone healthy and young-looking. As if they were actors playing their parts, So-young finished. Her voice barely above a whisper. The holographic displays continued to glow in the darkened room, showing graph after graph of civilizations that had followed the same pattern. Contact with the collective, rapid advancement, explosive growth, then inevitable decline and disappearance. The cycle had repeated dozens of times over the past 1,000 years. We have to report this, Jinwoo said, but his voice lacked conviction. They tried. The presentation to the World Council lasted 3 hours, with So-young and her team laying out their evidence in careful detail. The response was swift and decisive. Dismissal. The economic benefits of collective membership are undeniable, the Secretary General announced after their presentation. Human colonies are expanding faster than ever before. Our technology has advanced by centuries in just 2 years. We cannot jeopardize this progress based on speculation and conspiracy theories. Earth's economy now depended on alien trade. Kahari medical technology had eliminated most diseases. Gorlani, artistic techniques, had created entire new industries. Vek mining equipment had made space colonization profitable. The benefits of collective membership were too great to question. As they left the council chambers, So-young felt the weight of knowledge pressing down on her. They had discovered the pattern, but no one wanted to believe it. Humanity was walking down the same path that had led to the extinction of dozens of other species, and their leaders were too blinded by immediate benefits to see the danger ahead. The discovery happened by accident. Captain Choi's exploration ship had been mapping the Outer Rim territories when their sensors, detected artificial structures on what was supposed to be an empty world. The planet appeared dead from orbit, its surface covered in dust and ancient ruins. But deep underground, something was still running. Saul Young insisted on joining the expedition personally. After 2 years of being ignored by Earth's government, she had grown desperate for proof that could not be dismissed. The underground facility they found was unlike anything in the official galactic records. Smooth corridors stretched for kilometers, lit by panels that still glowed after centuries of abandonment. The power systems are still active, reported the team's engineer as they descended deeper into the complex. Whatever built this place designed it to last. They found the archives in a vast chamber filled with crystalline storage devices. The technology was unfamiliar, but the alien translation software that Kahari had provided worked perfectly. Perfectly, Soyoung realized later. The archives had been designed to be readable by anyone who found them. They knew, Sol Young whispered as she read the translated texts that appeared on her portable screen. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through document after document. They figured it out just like we did. The Havrani had been a peaceful species, much like humanity. They had developed space travel slowly, exploring their local star system. With careful scientific expeditions, and the Kahari had arrived, bringing gifts of advanced technology and promises of joining a great galactic community. The early records showed the same. Patterns Soyoung had identified in dozens of other species. First contact, technological gifts, rapid expansion, integration into the collective. But the Havrani had been careful record keepers, and their archives contained something the official histories did not: the truth about what happened next. Listen. To this, Soyoung called to Ginwoo, who was examining other storage devices across the chamber. She read aloud from the translated text. Year 847 of collective membership. Our birth rates continue to decline despite medical intervention. The Kahari advisors assure us this is normal, part of our species' natural evolution toward transcendence. The records painted a clear picture that made Soyoung's blood run cold. The Galactic Collective was not a benevolent alliance, but a sophisticated cultivation system. Species were contacted and studied, their unique capabilities assessed like crops in a field. The gifts of technology were not. Generous offerings, but carefully designed tools of control. The medical advances created dependencies. Havrani doctors had become unable to treat even simple diseases without Kaihari technology. The energy systems required rare materials that only the collective could provide. The transportation networks connected all Havrani worlds to collective control stations. The rapid expansions spread populations thin. Soyoung read from another file. We established colonies on 40 worlds, but each settlement was small and dependent on support from the home world. When the supply ships stopped coming, entire colonies were abandoned. But the most sinister part was the integration process itself. The collective had systematically dismantled Havrani culture, placing their art, literature, and philosophy with standardized galactic versions. Their unique ways of thinking were labeled as primitive and gradually eliminated through education. Programs, they're farming us, Jinwoo said, his voice hollow as he read through his own section of the archives. Like crops. The final entries in the Havrani records describe the harvest. Not violent conquest, but careful extraction of everything useful. Genetic material was collected for study. Cultural achievements were copied and preserved. Most intelligent individuals were recruited to serve the collective in various capacities. The rest were left to fade away and manage decline. The last generation of pure Havrani died yesterday, read the final entry. We number fewer than 10,000 now, scattered across 3 worlds. The collective has what it needs from us. They tell us we have achieved transcendence, but we know the truth. We're being erased. Soyoung spent 3 days in the archives, copying every file she could access. When she returned to Earth, she demanded a meeting with the World Council. This time she brought proof that could not be ignored. The confrontation with Ambassador Veltar took place in the Kaihari embassy. In Geneva, Ginwoo had requested the meeting, claiming he wanted to discuss expanded cultural exchange programs. Veltar received them in his private office, his crystalline features reflecting the afternoon sunlight. We know what you are, Jinwoo said. Without preamble, what you do to species like us. The Kahari's expression remained calm, almost serene. You speak as if we are predators. We are gardeners, tending to the galaxy's growth. Each species contributes what it can, then finds peace. In transcendence, extinction, you mean? Is a flower evil when it blooms, feeds others, and returns to soil? Veltar's voice carried the same musical quality that had charmed humanity during first contact. We have shepherded thousands of species through their natural cycles. Your kind will be no different. Soyoung stepped forward, her tablet displaying images from the Havrani archives. The Havrani didn't think they were flowers. They thought they were being murdered. The Havrani were a beautiful species, Veltar replied, showing no surprise. At the mention of the archives, their genetic diversity enriched our collective knowledge. Their artistic traditions inspired countless others. They achieved a form of immortality through their contributions. What makes you so certain that humans will follow the same path? Jinwoo asked. For the first time, Veltar showed something resembling emotion. His crystalline features shifted slightly, and his voice carried a note of absolute certainty. Because in 10,000 years of cultivation, no species has ever successfully resisted the pattern. It is simply the natural order. The meeting ended with polite farewells, but Soyoung could see the truth in Veltar's eyes. Humanity had been marked for harvest, and the collective had no doubt about the outcome. The secret meeting took place in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Moscow. It's far from the sensors that now monitored most of Earth's surface. Soyoung arrived first, her breath forming clouds in the cold air as she waited for the others. One by one, they emerged from the shadows. People would refuse to accept the official story of humanity's bright galactic future. Dr. Minho Zhang came from the Siberian Research Facility, a place that officially did not exist. His team had been working in complete secrecy for 2 years, taking apart every piece of Kahari technology they could get their hands on. His weathered face showed the strain of countless sleepless nights, but his eyes burned with determination. Captain Sujin Park arrived with 3 of her soldiers, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with the practiced alertness of combat veterans. Her military unit had been preparing for the possibility of alien betrayal since the day the Kahari ships first appeared.
While Earth's government celebrated,
She had been training her people for war. Dr. Wu Jinli looked tired and haunted. His work had taken him to the furthest edges of known space, searching for survivors of the collective's previous harvests. What he had found in the darkness between stars had changed him forever. He carried a datapad filled with testimonies from beings who had managed to escape the fate of their species. The collective expects us to follow the pattern, Soyoung said, her voice echoing in the tunnel. Gradual decline, managed extinction. But we're not like the other species they've harvested. Minho checked the modified weapon on his belt, a Kahari energy pistol that his team had stripped down and rebuilt. We're stubborn, he said. The Havrani tried to negotiate. The Mordeth tried to hide. The Zenthari tried to run away. We're going to fight. We're paranoid, Sujin added, reviewing the tactical displays on her portable screen. Every other species trusted the collective right up until the end. We've been planning for betrayal since day one. Ginwoo stepped forward, his face grim. With resolve, and we're angry. The Kahari made a mistake when they told us about transcendence. They thought we'd accept it like all the others. Instead, we got mad. The plan they had developed was simple but dangerous. Humanity would use the collective's own systems against them, broadcasting the truth across every communication network in the galaxy. The Havrani archives would be transmitted to every species still under collective control, showing them what their future really held. The hardest part will be the timing, Wu Jin explained. Need to hit every major communication hub simultaneously. If even one system stays online, the collective will shut down the entire network. The preparations had taken months. Minho's team had built transmitters that could interface with collective technology. Sujin's soldiers had infiltrated key installations across Earth and beyond. Ujin's contacts among the survivor communities had agreed to help spread the message once it began broadcasting. The war began not with explosions or battles, but with information. At precisely noon Greenwich Mean Time, the truth about the Galactic Collective began spreading across the galaxy. The Havrani archives appeared on every screen in every language, on every world that was connected to the Collective's communication network. Species that had been slowly declining suddenly understood why their birth rates were dropping. Civilizations that had been losing their cultural identity realized they were being systematically erased. The careful cultivation system that had worked for millennia began to crumble as its victims finally saw the pattern. The Kahari response was swift but confused. They had never faced organized resistance before. Ambassador Veltar appeared on Earth's communication networks, his crystalline features showing strain for the first time. The humans have been corrupted by dangerous ideas, he announced. They seek to destroy the peace and prosperity of the collective. But it was too late. The message had already spread too far to contain. On worlds across the galaxy, species that had been marked for harvest began to resist. The Vec mining colonies stopped sending resources to collective worlds. The Vorlani artists began creating works that criticized their galactic masters. Even species that had been loyal to the collective for centuries started asking uncomfortable questions. Captain Choi's converted exploration ship, the Soul's Pride, led the first military action of the rebellion. His target was a collective harvesting facility hidden in an asteroid field, where the genetic material and cultural artifacts of 17 extinct species were being stored and studied. For the Havrani, he announced over the ship's communication system as they approached the facility, for the Mordith, for the Xanthari, and for every species that should have had a chance to say no. The battle was brief but decisive. The collective's defenses were designed to prevent escape, not to repel attack. The facility's guards had never faced an enemy that fought back with such fury. Within hours, the Soul's Pride was broadcasting the contents of the genetic archives across the galaxy, proving that the extinct species had not transcended, had been murdered. The Kahari and their allies tried to organize a response, but they faced something unprecedented, a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history preparing for exactly this kind of fight. Humans had been waging war against deception and control for thousands of years. They understood betrayal, conspiracy, and resistance in ways that the collective had never encountered. More importantly, humanity was not alone. The truth had awakened something that had been sleeping in the galaxy for millennia. Other species began to remember their own histories, their own cultures, their own reasons to resist. The collective's victims became its enemies, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the gardeners faced a crop that refused to be harvested. The galaxy would never be the same.